I'm Simon Brown. I'm here at the Nedbank head offices in Sandton, Johannesburg, talking sustainable finance with Ivana Singh, Head Sustainable Finance Solutions at Nedbank Corporate Investment Bank. Appreciate the time today. In terms of net zero, where are we in the net zero story? We hear about it all the time, but I think a lot of folks are perhaps confused as to what's really happening out there.
Yes, indeed. This is a term that has been used quite a lot, and it is a very important term because it refers to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as close to zero as possible, and with the residual emissions of that also being mitigated away through absorption through various carbon sinks. Now, we have seen a number of different industries start to commit to net zero. So what has been interesting is that this is really becoming adopted widespread, whether that be through corporates themselves across industries, through investors who are committing to net zero in their portfolios, to decarbonize their portfolios. We're also seeing service providers such as law firms and the like now also starting to commit to net zero, and effectively this will start influencing the practices that and services that they actually provide in order to all get to net zero. So it's really encouraging to see a number of parties get on board and making these commitments. I think we now also are starting to see some of these players at the second part of that journey, where they're actually starting to form glide paths in terms of what net zero would look like. So for example, to understand from a baseline perspective what your current carbon emissions are looking like is step number one. And then afterwards, it's around how do we actually construct a glide path to move towards net zero in our operations and start reducing scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. We also need to remember that we're in a context that's changing, and there is the science that is basically providing us with certain findings. And having science-based targets, or targets that basically align to a scenario that is valid and fit for purpose is quite important. And there are a number of scenarios that have also been emerging, and therefore identifying that scenario which is relevant to you as a business, which applies to the context and which is actually practical for you to adopt is quite important, and quite an important decision point in that process as well. So we are seeing now that second layer of delving deeper into which scenarios do we look at, how do we actually start to construct our targets, what carbon budget is relevant depending on your geography as well, because you may find there's certain players who can make larger impact based on where they're currently situated, and as a result of the carbon intensity of the grid.
What I like about that is that it's everybody's responsibility. It's not just one particular factory that's got a lot of pollutants. You mentioned the lawyers. It's even my responsibility at home when I'm doing my shopping, my groceries. Less plastic. It's a small thing, but it's everyone getting on board. And that seems to, from what you're saying, being that trend where we're all taking responsibility for a net zero future.
Yes, and it's interesting to see how this trend is going to start moving markets and making different decisions, because it could mean that certain counterparties who you were doing business with before is going to look at you in a different light. And what does that mean in terms of can we trade with them, can we use the service provider, etc., etc. So there is an underlying trend that is going to follow this, and if we follow the golden thread or the green thread through this, I think that's going to be quite important to understand the impacts that this would have inward and outward.
I like that. Almost sort of net zero peer pressure, but the right sort of peer pressure. We'll leave that there. My name's Simon Brown. I'm recording from the Nedbank head offices in Sandton, Johannesburg.